Hey team, your lawyer Abby here, coming in with some tidbits on Louisiana law and car insurance. So today's lesson is going to be how to read your auto policy. This is a document called the declarations page. Now you may be totally familiar with this and this may be old hat, but you would be surprised how many people have never even looked at their declarations page. So I'm going to walk you through how to read it, what it looks like, and then I want to talk to you about the importance of adding uninsured motorist bodily injury to your policy. And it's important to know this now because by the time you have to hire a lawyer, the damage has already been done. You either have it or you don't. And so I've made this video to send to all of you so that before you need to hire me, you'll have everything you need in place for your coverages. So let's get my face out of the way and let's dig deep and look into the declarations page. So I have redacted this for the privacy of the policyholder here, but this is a typical Geico insurance declarations page. The policy coverage period is typically a 6-month window. This is when the policy starts and when it ends. And a lot of times if you take out insurance, let's say you've switched to Geico for the first time, you used to have State Farm or Progressive, and you switch to Geico. That first policy lasts 6 months. And then as long as you keep paying your premiums, then the policy will renew. So it'll roll over and you'll have a renewal policy every 6 months after that. But your declarations page will say just that. Declarations page, it'll have the insurance company name, the date the policy was issued, and it'll show 12:01 a.m. local time on, say, June 15th, 2024 through through December 15th, 2024. It'll have the name of the insured, your email address. It'll have the named insureds listed. So if this is a husband and wife or anybody who is that you want to deem as a named insured on your policy, and then you might have some additional drivers listed. You really need to list all the drivers who live in your household who are of driving age, unless you have deemed them to be an excluded driver. And we'll cover excluded drivers in a different video segment. But anybody who is over the age of 16, has a valid driver's license, and even if they never drive your car, if they legally could and they live in your house, you got to name them as an additional driver unless they've been properly excluded. Next, this particular policy has 4 vehicles listed. You might only have 1, but there'll be at least 1 vehicle listed with the VIN number, the location. This is the city and zip code where the vehicle is typically garaged. So if you live in New Orleans, it'll be New Orleans plus your zip code. No matter where you live, it'll be your town and your zip code. And then if you have a lien holder or a car note on the vehicle, it'll indicate there. Now to the important part, coverages. This is what most people don't look at and they don't realize what their coverages are. In Louisiana, as of the date of this video, as of September of 2025, the bodily injury liability minimum limits are 15, 30, 25. That's what this is right here. So if you were to go and take out a policy of liability insurance and say, what's the cheapest coverage I can get that makes me legal to drive on the road? I don't want to pay a penny more than I have to. This is the coverage you'll get. Bodily injury liability is just that. If you cause a wreck and you hurt somebody else, then your policy will pay up to $15,000 per person for any injuries that they have sustained. This includes medical bills, pain and suffering, lost wages, all of that, for a total of $30,000 per incident. So that means if you get into a fender bender with one other driver and they have a whiplash case and they've got some neck and back pain and they go to the doctor and they get checked out, then typically that should be enough to cover everything. If you happen to lose control on the road and your vehicle spins out and you hit 3 or 4 other vehicles, all of their drivers and their passengers, if they're injured, would be potential claimants. And the $30,000 aggregate has to be enough to cover all the injuries per incident. So sometimes you have more injured folks, either more numerous, there are more of them, or the injuries may be more serious than what your policy limit will cover. If that happens, you could be on the hook personally for any additional damages. So if you get into a wreck and you cause somebody a broken arm, then anything above what your policy covers, they may come after you personally for that. But minimum limits are up to $15,000 per person, no more than $30,000 per incident. So if you've got 10 injured people and they all have the same injuries and the same medical bills and the same everything, then they're each going to get $3,000 out of the incident. It's a little more complicated than that in practice, but you get the idea. And then the property damage liability. This means per accident, per incident, it'll pay up to $25,000 for property damage. So if you have one damaged vehicle and the damage is under 25 grand for that vehicle, this will cover it. If it's more than that, you may be on the hook for the difference. If you have multiple damaged vehicles, their combined total damages, this covers only up to $25,000. This is an important part I want to look at, the uninsured motorist bodily injury for each person and each occurrence. So here it says insured rejects. We're going to get to that in a second and explain what that means and why that's not a good thing. It makes your insurance cheaper, but not by much, not by enough to be worth it. And I'll tell you about that in a minute. Now down here we have comprehensive, excluding collision, and collision. And then we've got emergency road service. Comprehensive is to the damage to your vehicle. If you have any damage to your vehicle, in this case, other than being in a collision, this says it'll cover the damage and here's the deductible, $1,500. If you're in a collision, the damage is $1,500. ERS, emergency road service, this person's got full emergency road service. So if you need a tow from the side of the road, this person's got that coverage. Not everybody will have all this. If your vehicle is old or it costs more to repair than the car is worth, you may not have comprehensive and collision coverage. And I want to say this part quickly. If you have ever heard of the term full coverage, that's a misnomer. There's no such thing as truly full coverage just by that term. Full coverage strictly means it covers comprehensive and collision to your vehicle. It does not cover the person. So if you hear somebody say they've got full coverage, I want you to tell them, look at your declarations page, see what you really do have. There's no such thing as full coverage. Now, then we go to the next page. It goes to each of the vehicles. In this case, there are 4 vehicles. This is the premium. I've redacted all that per vehicle, and then the total price they're paying over 6 months. Then there's some discounts here and there. Now, I want to show you the uninsured motorist bodily injury selection form. You saw up here on the declarations page, it said uninsured motorist bodily injury insured rejects. In Louisiana, there is a form that is issued by the state of Louisiana Department of Insurance. This is what it looks like when it's blank. If you're lucky, if you really have full coverage, the best of the best, and you've got all the best coverages that you can have on your policy, then you don't have this form filled out in your file. The best thing is not to have this filled out at all. This form will essentially limit or reject uninsured motorist bodily injury coverage that protects you or people riding in your vehicle if somebody else is at fault for a crash. By law, the state of Louisiana says that all auto insurance carriers have to give you uninsured motorist coverage that is equal to the amount of your liability coverage unless you choose to waive it or reject it. And if you have waived it, rejected it, or selected a lower amount, that's going to be filled out on this form in your file. In this case, the policyholder who has this Geico policy filled this out online, and they chose to reject uninsured motorist bodily injury coverage. This means all they have is liability only to protect other people on the road, plus some coverages to protect their vehicle. If their car is destroyed or damaged, it can be repaired. But it doesn't protect them, not their person, nothing. In this case, the insured chose to waive any extra coverage that would cover their medical bills, their lost wages, pain and suffering, all of it. I urge you never to fill this form out. By law, the insurance company has to give you uninsured motorist bodily injury if you don't fill this form out. People fill it out because they expect it to make their insurance rates a little cheaper, and it makes it a little cheaper. Not worth it. Check your rates, compare, see what it'll actually cost to have this. On this form, again, It's ideal if you don't fill this out at all. You want full uninsured motorist bodily injury coverage. But if you choose to have less than full coverage, this is what you'd be selecting from. Option 1 provides uninsured motorist bodily injury coverage with limits lower than what your liability policy is. Now, again, in this case, their liability is bare minimum, state minimum coverage. So in this case, in order for them to have coverage that's lower than their liability, they have to reject it entirely because there is not an amount that they could select that's lower. But if their insurance was a 2550 liability policy or 5100, then they could select something lower. Maybe save a little money and get lower rates. Number 1 is not ideal, but it at least covers economic and non-economic losses. That's better than nothing. Economic losses, as you see up here, are those that can be measured in specific monetary terms, including but not limited to medical costs, funeral expenses, lost wages, and out-of-pocket. Non-economic are other losses that not limited to pain and suffering, inconvenience, mental anguish, and other types of losses that you can't necessarily add up with receipts. So number 1 is better than nothing, but it's not as good as full coverage. Number 2 is economic only UMBI. This option says I want the same limits as on my bodily injury liability. So for these folks, it's 1530, but I want economic only, meaning I don't want to protect myself for any type of pain and suffering, mental anguish, inconvenience. No. I just want to reimburse my lost wages, medical bills, and things of that nature. Option 2 is better than nothing because at least it's the same limits as your liability coverage, but you still are limiting yourself from all the protections that UMBI could give you, so it's not ideal. Option 3, economic only UMBI coverage providing compensation for economic losses only with limits lower than the bodily injury limits. Again, in this case, this insured has minimum liability limits, so they can't select anything lower than minimum. If they'd had a bigger liability policy, they could select something lower. Option 3 is not ideal because it's economic only, so it only covers things you can add up with receipts, and it's lower limits than what your liability coverage is. You're already paying to protect other people at a higher degree. Might as well protect yourself at the same degree that you pay to protect others. So it's an option. It's not ideal, but it's there. Option 4 says, I don't want UMBI at all. You reject it outright. This is the worst option. Yes, it saves you a couple of bucks on your monthly insurance bill, but you're already paying a bunch to protect other people on the road from yourself. Might as well kick in an extra couple of dollars. It's really not that much more expensive to protect yourself. I cannot tell you how many clients, and I've had hundreds, probably a couple of thousand clients in my career now, who choose to reject uninsured motorist bodily injury entirely. By the time you get into a wreck, by the time you hire a lawyer, it's too late. And I can't tell you how many clients I've had who are screwed because they get hit by an uninsured driver and now their medical bills aren't paid, lost wages not paid, nothing. Their physical pain and suffering. I've had clients who've got multiple broken bones, nothing. Because the person who hit them was uninsured and because they rejected any extra coverage for themselves. This is not ideal. So, however, it is an option and legally you're allowed to waive that coverage if you initial Section 4. Then your signature goes here, your name is printed here, the date that you sign the form, and then the policy number that you take out and the insurance company name. So this is a properly executed rejection form. It's legal, it's binding. This particular person does not have any extra coverage for themselves, and they have to pray that when they're in a wreck, the person who hit them has insurance to begin with, liability insurance, and has enough insurance to cover all of the damages that occurred in that particular wreck. So, check your declarations pages. Look at your insurance policy. Make sure that you know what your limits are, that you know what coverages you have, and I strongly recommend that you add uninsured motorist bodily injury. The full coverage, UMBI, economic and non-economic. And you want it to be in the same limits as what your liability limits are. All right? Follow me for more details And if you have any questions about how to read your own insurance policy, just reach out. I run the Lukov Injury Law in Louisiana. My name is Abby Lukov, and they call me My Lawyer Abby. Look me up online, mylawyerabby.com, on Instagram, My Lawyer Abby, or on Facebook. Thanks.